Duel tier list for May 2023. Now, there's been some rumblings about a new selection pack that's going to include some awesome brand new cards, and I'm here to talk all about them and where do I think these particular strategies sit. Of course, I have 5 different categories here. I got top tier, which is going to be the best of the best Master Duel decks available. I have the best decks in the game. These decks are still extremely good in the Master Duel meta. Great potential or strategies that have the ability to take it all the way to the top or are building towards something extremely great. Takes a really good pilot is going to be the tier that you're going to need to know how to pilot the deck extremely well. And then a real challenge is for those people that's trying to get it out the mud. People that want to impress people by getting a diamond one with these particular decks. Let's go ahead and start off with Adamancipator. This rock deck, as long as Block Dragon exists, I don't think really much changes. It is an extremely good deck. Now, I still think Block Dragon should be banned, and the people that have seen that video, you gotta see why the deck is still ridiculous. Being able to summon a Dragon Ruler-like monster and search all of the Earth monsters you need to continuously extend is extremely good. The deck doesn't even care about cards like Maxi as it can OTK, and then has board breaker cards like Forbidden Droplet to be able to address whatever board it is in. Overall, I think it's a solid deck. Now, Branded has actually pretty much fallen completely off the face of the earth when it came to Yu-Gi-Oh! The good thing about this deck is that we'll continue to get support over the 2023-2024 year, and this deck does get ridiculously stronger. One of the biggest problems with Branded in this particular Master Duel meta is that it's weak to Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. And Ash Blossom on Branded Fusion could end your turn, and just about everybody plays Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring to max C. Fortunately enough, this deck does have some amazing potential. It's still one of the better decks in the game, and the support that's coming out for the deck makes it really, really, really good. So watch out for this deck as it's going to continue to get support through 2023 and 2024, and it'll reclaim its spot as one of the better decks in Master Duel. Blue Eyes, guys, I genuinely don't know why we make a tier list with Blue Eyes. I mean, sometimes we make the tier list just so we can check the people that say, where's my Blue Eyes deck? Unfortunately, making it to Diamond 1 with Blue Eyes, you're the man. You're like Seto Kaiba if you can make it with Blue Eyes to Diamond 1, as this deck is extremely challenged no matter the support that has been coming out for it. Same thing for Dark Magician. You're pretty much Yu-Gi-Oh! If you can make it to Diamond 1 with either of these decks, you are the man. You are probably the top 1% of Dark Magician and Blue Eyes players in the entire world. So congratulations if you can do it, because those are real challenge Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks and aren't necessarily the best decks when coming into the Master Duel game. Dinos are not necessarily a terrible deck in Master Duel. There's more Dino cards off the Forbidden list than in the TCG and OCG, and the deck still isn't great. The biggest problem with Dino is that we are in a Master Duel meta where things are a little bit different. I personally think that Dinos is better at going second and just breaking boards and potentially OTKing, but there are actually just better decks to play, and the resources for this particular deck that you need to build is extremely high. Overall, the correct pilot with Dinosaurs can actually do some really incredible things. Dragon Link, this is almost exactly like the Branded deck that's coming up. Both of these strategies just will continuously get support over time and will get stronger even though they're not doing as well right now. The coolest thing I want to point out about Dragon Link is that in the OC or in Master Duel, we still have cards like Chaotic Ruler to Chaotic Magical Dragon, which is a ridiculous god card. Almost searching cards like Gamma, Nibiru, and Effect Veiler is just really, really powerful for this. When the Bestial monsters do come out, Dragon Link becomes way better. It has so much potential, and right now it's a solid deck. Exosister is exactly what we expected it to be. One of the better decks in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Game. We probably could consider it as a top tier deck, but that might be a little bit of a stretch. The reason why is because Dimension Shifter outright wins games. It's just a blowout card against a lot of top tiers, especially against the best deck in Master Duel, which is still tier limit. The ban list did nothing, guys. That's pretty much is what it is. But Exosister is really good at being able to control the tempo of the game for graveyard reliant decks and summon some of those powerful Exceeds. And the biggest thing I want to point out is that there's going to be a stretch where this deck becomes like really bad. But you're going to get some spirit monsters that help you make this deck one of the better decks again fairly soon afterward. Tearlament, best deck in Master Duel. Again, Instant Fusion didn't do anything. The ban hurt other decks more than it hurt this deck, which was really, really weird. Like, it was ridiculously interesting that Konami decided to make a forbidden list and hit all of the other decks on this particular that we have here, as opposed to just hitting the actual problematic card. I would say Floowandereeze is still one of the better decks in the game. So these two things have a lot of things in common when it comes to the Tearlament matchup, is that if you open Dimension Shifter, it's could be an auto win against graveyard reliant decks. And Floowandereeze Impin, even with all of the hits, being able to summon Impin to your side of the field is a little bit harder to be able to get rid of. These are some of the better decks, maybe on the fringe side of best decks, but still really good. We're apparently getting some Fur Hire support. So the new Fur Hire support in Donner and Rex, those are really good Yu-Gi-Oh cards. But the problem with Fur Hire is its biggest problem is going to be getting Max Seed. So we said that Earth Machine was not a great deck in Master Duel because of Max Seed. Earth Machine allows you to be able to put out an interesting board and draw 2 cards. Fur Hires allow you to put out an interesting board and draw 2 cards. The only difference between these is that Earth Machine locks you into Earth Machine throughout the entirety, and Fur Hire is a little bit more flexibility. I would say with Donner and Rex, there's some great potential for this deck. I don't think it's going to be a world beater or anything, but it's still a fairly decent deck in Master Duel. Now, Ghoti. Ghoti actually has some potential to shake up the Yu-Gi-Oh game a little bit different than what it did in the TCG. When it came out in the TCG, it pretty much just fell flat. There wasn't a lot of traction for this particular deck, but I think people are going to look at this deck and be like, yo, this is like a Dimensional Fissure Macrocosmos type deck. It has a really good matchup against Tear in that essence, and it also plays just a little bit better going second than Exosister or Floowandereeze would. I think coming off the bat, if you get all of the good Ghoti cards, or maybe all of the Ghoti cards in one bunch, as opposed to split like how we did in the TCG, this could be one of the better decks in the game. Now, this could be my hopium take. I really do want Ghotis to actually be successful because I think it diversifies the game. But overall, I think maybe great potential. I think maybe great potential because it could be here, but it could also just be right here. Like, let's just put it that way. Ice Jades, I highly doubt that we're going to get Ice Jade Khan alongside of the Ice Jade Synchro monster. I just highly doubt it. If we do get it, there's better water decks to play too. So hypothetically we get both, it would probably, and it takes a really good pilot, but other than that, it's just not worth playing. There are better water decks in the game. Labrynth, I didn't see any Labrynth mommy milkers, guys. We have not gotten the big Labrynth mommy that actually searches trap cards. I would say takes a really good pilot until then. Being able to search different dimension ground would be amazing in this particular format. It gives you a way to combat decks like Tear and Adamancipator and Graveyard Reliant decks, while also just being able to search cards like Dimensional Barrier, which could be a blowout. But for right now, I'm just going to say takes a really good pilot. Not enough strong trap cards to justify playing Labrynth. Madolche. Okay, so I hyped Madolche as one of the best decks to counter Tear, and it's still a really, really good deck. But from what we've seen on the ladder, Madolche is not meeting expectations. Now, this deck is still fairly cheap. I don't think that there's a single ultra rare that I can think of from Madolche in the main board. I think some of the extra deck cards are ultra rares, which is fine. I mean, it's justified. They're kind of busted. But Madolche is still a strategy that can combat Tearlament and actually has the ability to blow some of these boards out of the water through Tiramisu. I wouldn't say it's a bad deck, but it's one of those decks where, how do I put this? The players that play Dragon Maid are now probably playing Madolche and Exosisters, if you get what I'm saying, you know? Marincess becomes one of the best decks in Master Duel. From what I am getting World Sea Dragon Zealantis is coming inside of the next set. If it does, this deck has the ability to board wipe. And how this works is that if you activate the effect of like Marincess Slug, Marincess Anemone, which locks you into waters for the rest of the turn, if you summon World Sea Dragon Zealantis and declare its effect, banishing all monsters on the field, if your opponent has monsters that are not water, they won't come back to the side of the field because you are special summoning the monsters and you are locked into only summoning water monsters. So essentially you get a giant board clear for this deck that's very, very easy to link summon into and can reset your link monsters or monsters back to your side of the field to be able to position yourself to link summon some more. So really, really, really good deck here. I think that is going to be extremely solid. Hero players, first of all, your deck is too expensive. Second of all, half of you guys have a single brain cell, but overall, a good hero player, he can go places. This deck's just too expensive to like build though. Mathmech, when the Bestials come out, I really would tell you to steer away from this deck. That's what pretty much kills Mathmech. But for right now, it's extremely good. It's still one of those great decks that can OTK. I would probably say that it requires a better player than the deck right now, but then Mathmech is fairly linear, and maybe I'm just underestimating you Yu-Gi-Oh players, and you know, I'm like, you probably need to be coddled through this deck, but no, it's still really, really strong. Melfys are potentially, again, these are all leaks, quote unquote, nothing confirmed, getting the Stardust Synchron, and there's actually a combo with Melfy with Stardust Synchron that allows you to make Baronne de Fleur and like actually summon some really powerful synchro cards. There's also, what's that other card? Herald of Arclight for this deck, which is really good. The problem with Melfy is that why play Melfy when you can play Melfy Spright? I do think that, you know, this particular Stardust Excel Stardust Synchron gives you that ability. But for right now, I'm just going to say really good pilot because there is a better way to play it, quote unquote, in Melfy Spright because you still get Herald of Arclight, and Baronne de Fleur isn't that much of a game-changing card to be like, yo, let me just not play Spright and just play the Melfy cards. You know, the lock-in 2, you know, it's still almost inconsequential. Naturia coming into this format. So, Naturia has all of the potential to be a bad deck. All of it. Like, it has all of the potential to be like a real challenge, and here's why. We've already pegged Exosister, Floowandereeze, and Tearlaments as some of the better decks. If these decks continue to be the better decks, Naturia does not have a great matchup against Dimension Shifter, right? Naturia just doesn't have a great matchup against Tearlaments because while it is a great deck, overall this deck's biggest win con is making Naturia Beast and sometimes even a Shinging with a Runic Fountain. That's something that Tearlaments can play around. But, hypothetically, let's go through hypothetical land. I'm Thanos snapping you guys. The format becomes closer to this. Then this is good. It's good. It stops some of the most powerful spell cards, Lightning Storm, Triple Tactics Talent, all those other crazy things. The Runic Engine in this deck is kind of insane. It goes bananas with this deck. They draw like 5-6 cards in one turn. It can be extremely powerful. So there is great potential with this particular Yu-Gi-Oh deck with the new Naturia cards. Plunder Patrol, unfortunately, still takes a really good pilot. Jade does a lot of great things for Plunder Patrol. The only problem with that is that when you get Jade, you'll start to realize that Plunder Patrol is better, but it's still power crept. And with the Adventure Engine being hit in Master Duel, it's going to have a hard time being able to survive. Now, in theory, I think probably the best way to play Plunder Patrol would probably be a Kaiju variant. That might be it. That may work for you guys. Being able to give your opponent a Kaiju, Dark, Earth, you know, Light, and then make your Plunder Patrol combos pop off. It can also play around cards like Rukalos, I believe Clado Heart too. So it could work. It could work, but still, it's probably just a little bit stronger decks out there. The weirdest thing about P.U.N.K and Master Duel is that Hockley Fabrics is banned, as it should be. It's kind of busted, but Chaotic Ruler is not. And potentially we're getting Diablantis as well, which is really good for the strategy. This also is a strategy that I think has great potential. I think Again, a graveyard reliant deck. So if we got like these in the meta, you know what I mean? Then, and this becomes good, then these two decks, they become like, you get macroed and you're just like, well, damn. And then it becomes, it's like, you know what I mean? It's just not a pleasurable matchup. But hypothetically, if the meta isn't revolved around DeFi macro cards, these become some of the better decks. So you can have it either way. Either these two are down here or these two are up here. I think that's how the meta is going to go. Rikka, this deck is underrated. Like, this is one of the better decks in Master. Like, this deck has no weakness. Like, more people need to play this deck. It's a reason why this deck won one of the biggest YCSs when Tearlaments was the best deck. You just tribute your opponent's monsters. Like, there's no debate. They're like, Rukalos, that's nice. I'll tribute Rukalos and keep playing. Like, this deck's stupid. It's like, this deck should not exist. It is one of the secretly best decks in the entire game. It plays under the macro cards fairly well, and just tributing your opponent's boss monsters is kind of ridiculous. Scareclaw, I mean, I would put it in real challenge, but I think that's disrespectful because these decks just aren't as playable as Scareclaw. Spright, one of the best decks in the entire game, guys. It's really no debate here. The best version I still think is Spright Melfy, and when Spright Double Cross comes out, I'm telling you guys right now, when Spright Double Cross comes out, this deck is even more insane. It's better than Spright Smashers. Spright Double Cross literally has no cost. Swordsoul gets a new monster. And so I was actually testing the new monster at the end of tier format. And the new monster is really good when there are field spells and there needs to be some banishment going on. Now, unfortunately, tier doesn't have a field spell. Like, it's limited to one. So the odds of you being able to interact with the new Swordsoul monster in your opponent's field spell, not necessarily going to happen as much. But Marincess has a field spell. Floowandereeze has a field spell, albeit limited. Exosisters did have a field spell. It's banned. Rikka has a field spell. So, like, but overall, Swordsoul, even with all that, it's still really good. It's one of the better decks in the game. And Tri-Brigade takes a really good pilot. I would not play this deck. I just would not play this deck. It's just not that good. But that's all that I have for my Master Duel tier list for May 2023. Let me know what you guys think down below in the comment section. What do you think about these particular decks? How powerful do you think that they are? Did I move, or do I have something a little low or too high? I can't wait to read your comments, and I'll catch you on the next one.